in person. First of all, thanks everybody for being here on this Saturday morning. My name is Bill Kowski. I'm the director of the Arkansas Public Policy Panel. This event today is part of a national effort. There's events happening in all 50 states called Families First. It's focusing on the impacts of the Trump budget reconciliation bill. I refuse to call it what it's called. On families. And in some states, they're doing giant protests and marches. And other states, they're doing events at congressmen's offices. In Arkansas, y'all and a bunch of other folks have been doing a lot of that already. So for today, we thought it would be good to kind of do a deeper dive on the substance of what the measure actually contains. It was so big that I think most people who voted for it have no idea really what's in it. And so that's our goal today. So we have some amazing speakers. We're going to talk about the kind of 5 different aspects, or 4 different aspects of the bill, the cuts to health care and Medicaid, the cuts to food aid, the cuts to clean energy and environmental programs, the massive expansion of ICE and immigration kind of becoming a police state, and then the impacts on tax fairness and the budget. So actually that is fine. And so we're going to cover those. After each speaker is going to be a few minutes of question and answer. We can't let that drag on forever or this will become unfun for everybody. But we do want it to have some back and forth and also to break up each speaker so it's not just a giant college lecture. And folks may be on Facebook, who are watching on Facebook Live, can enter questions into the chat on Facebook, and one of our staff will enter those. So we're trying to make it more big state, and everybody can make it good this morning. We have 2 speakers still on their way, so if you see people coming up to the table, don't tackle them or anything. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good start. A couple other just real brief things to mention. There's a bunch of handouts for you. One thing that we like to remind people is not all politics are at the federal level. So you'll have to see a directory to who's in the Arkansas legislature and how to contact them. What makes our directory particularly useful, we think, is that it also has a map of every single committee. And so you can see who's on that committee really quickly and how to contact them, like the House Revenue and Tax Committee, etc. And these legislators tend to respond to people who live in their districts. And I don't suspect any of you have 20 homes across Arkansas. But you probably know people who live in these districts because we're such a small state. So contact your friends and have them contact their legislators. The other thing we have that we're super excited about, we just released this a week ago, is our legislative vote guide. This will tell you how every single member of the legislature, same people that are in the other book, actually voted on the key bills of this last legislative session that we took positions on Citizens First Congress, which means our members voted to take positions on those. It's organized by civil rights, economic justice, education, the environment, and voting rights. And this year, unfortunately, we had to add a whole special section focused on direct democracy. So there's a lot of work happening in the state level. There's a couple of ballot measure campaigns I'd love to drone on you about, but that's not the focus today. So with that, I'm going to just turn it over again. Thank you all for being here. It's part of a big effort across the country. At the end, we're going to talk about what we can do about these terrible cuts, and really Arkansas's delegation in total voting for all of these, or for the bill, didn't do Arkansas any favors. This is a terrible bill for Arkansas, as you're going to hear. So at the end, we're going to talk about kind of it being phased in, so not all the bad impacts are going to happen at once, and there might be some things we can do to either try to unwind or mitigate some of the different problems. So we're going to talk about what we can do with it. It's not going to be all doom and gloom. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to our first speaker talking about healthcare cuts, Dr. FranSha Anderson. I really appreciate you being here. And this is here for her.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Bill, and thank you. I want to do a special shout out to Myra Sills and Rebecca Zimmerman for actually recommending me. My name is Dr. FranSha Anderson, and I'm the CEO, Executive Director of Arkansas State Independent Living Council, which is federally funded. We were formed under the Rehab Act of 1973. Every state and territory has a SILC, S-I-L-C, and we advocate for the rights of people with all disabilities, with cross disability, from children to 99. You think anything that affects you, I guarantee you, we do that. We also write policy. I just came from DC. I don't have a PowerPoint, but hopefully I can articulate well enough that you will catch the main points of this. When I was asked to do this, first and foremost, I'm a parent. I'm a parent of 2 daughters. Both are deaf, but one has multiple disabilities, from minor spinal bifida, autism, and she also has minor scoliosis. And as the mother of those daughters, it's very important to me that we protect Medicaid. My daughter Maddie is a client of Pathfinder. That community integration is very important. She loves being around her peers. She gets to work. She doesn't make sub-minimum wage. She makes a little check. So every couple of weeks she has a check that comes home. The cuts to Medicaid will be very detrimental to families. And although my other daughter works, and she has 3 sons who are CODAs, they can hear, she would not be able to afford insurance for her 3 sons. So just like any other family, she's working, but y'all know that Arkansas, we're a very red state, and this poses a serious threat to families, and especially the disability community. So the cuts to Medicaid for families and those with members who have disabilities, there are several areas that I'd like to just discuss with you. Loss of essential health care services, of course, there's an increase to out-of-pocket. Families already are facing a significant financial burden. This will just burden them even more. The reduced to access to specialists, those that specialize in areas for those families might struggle to get that specialized care, and services for managing complex disabilities. And this results in compromised health outcomes. The withdrawal of personal care assistant. My daughter Maddie has an extra caregiver. I'm her caregiver, number 1. But just like I was just in DC, she has someone that helps me, and that is also, there's a threat to that. Without the Medicaid funding, many families will lose the access to the care, and making it difficult for those individuals with disabilities to perform just daily tasks: bathing, dressing, cooking for themselves. My Maddie only uses the microwave. She's scared of the stove. And just, this can lead to an increased reliance on other family members. The risk of institutionalization. Y'all might remember the Armstead Act of 1999. Now, it's not Medicaid related, but it was where people would have a choice, community-based, to be in the community or institutionalized, but it was a protective type deal, and we can talk about that later, or if you have questions about that. With diminished home and community-based services, families will have no choice but to send their loved ones to an institution. Is that fair? No, it's not fair. It doesn't matter if you're quadriplegic, whatever your problem is, you deserve to live in the community, work and play. It's just whatever is for you may not be for you. And that's what families are going to face if these cuts actually happen. I already mentioned the impact on caregivers. The reduced funding for caregivers. Members may experience those stress levels, leading to burnout, and then additional caregiver responsibilities with inadequate support. Loss of employment. Family members who act as the primary caregivers, like myself, may be reduced to work hours, to leave their jobs in their entirety to provide care. Now, the thing about Maddie, she can walk and she can do some things, but she has to be prompted. She has to be prompted. It's a little bit different. But this can lead to financial instability, which permeates two other things that my colleagues are going to talk about. There's limited access to community services, and these cuts can lead to reduced funding for programs to support socialization and the community integration. I already mentioned the emotional and psychological effects, the reduced quality of life. Overall, the well-being and quality of life for individuals with disabilities and their families may suffer due to these cuts. Medicaid cuts are far-reaching implications, as I mentioned, and you'll hear from my colleagues that'll talk about it even more. More than 1 in 5, over 80 million people, more than 1 in 5 in the U.S. rely on Medicaid for health insurance, and there's 17 million older adults. If you recall, in 2023, 84% of voters with agreement across party lines said Congress should put a higher priority on protecting Medicaid. Are they protecting it? Medicaid is a lifeline, y'all. It plays a vital, pivotal role in lowering costs for families and providing aging and disability care and comprehensive health. Cutting or defunding Medicaid will create major gaps in state funding and devastate the state budget as well. So, I stand with you and others in the disability community for our aging, the disabled, to tell them again, don't cut Medicaid. We know that it may be further up the road, but hopefully, if there's a will, there's a way. And as a family member, as one with children with disabilities, I know that it will be a hardship for me. I hope I said something that impacted you, and I'm ready for questions.
If being institutionalized becomes the only choice, where's the funding coming from for proper care?
Good question. I didn't say anything about that. Even if they're institutionalized, that Medicaid gets cut, that's going to affect that too. That's what I was talking about, those implications. Although I mentioned institutionalization, they too will be affected. So I think, as Bill has mentioned, they didn't really read this bill. Because I know for a fact that there's several older adults and they have those parents that you know, I know a lot. They know the Attorney General, because I remember some of that. They didn't like taking the R word out of language. They don't realize it. And when they do, hopefully it's going to turn things around. So thank you for that question.
So one of the things that I am very concerned about, and thank you for this, because that's a perspective not all of us think of,
Yes.
but is the concerns about the rural clinics and hospitals that have so much of their income that are relying on Medicaid. Do we have a sense in the state what percentage of clinics, hospitals are truly at risk of shutting down because of these cuts? Does anybody know?
I don't, but I know yesterday on our call.
So 75%.
I should have asked my question. 75%.
Yeah, I'll say a little more about that.
Okay.
Because I want the finances on.
Question, kind of split, I'll try to be short. With the disabled, the disabled seems to have, even though it may be cut, they're not going to be out, help required to work and required to, they're going to get funding because they're going to have a hearing. It seems, I think they're well funded myself. It's the working adults. I'm 62, I'm on Medicaid, I work, I'm not disabled, I don't get anything from the government, not because I don't want to, but I'm getting too old. I can't work 8 hours. I have a physical labor job. I can't work 80 hours. So I think the disabled will be taken care of. That's my point. But I'm worried about the working adults. The work requirement, I think, should be implemented.
There is a volunteer component to that as well. But mind you, although my daughter that lives independent and she's got it, she works 30 hours a week. So she's already working. There are, will they be taken care of? They say it, but
I have two disabled, they were well taken care of.
Yes,
Two
well,
siblings that were, they were well taken care of by funding.
you may think that, but there's a lot of funding that still needs to be taken care of, you know,
have any idea how our state will be doing their reporting for work requirements? Because I remember last time we had a lot of folks that were experiencing homelessness, and we tried our best at Canvas Community downtown to help them report. It's just a bizarro system. I hope they're not just going to turn that one back on.
If I can speak, National Alliance Against Homelessness has identified Arkansas as one of those chronic states. And we have some strategic meetings set up. I serve in Central Arkansas Teen Care for the Homeless on the board of directors attached through the city of Little Rock. And they will be coming and they're going to help us with strategies. And so I already feel I'll let this group know as well. So hopefully they'll be able to provide us with some direction and some strategies.
On the, if I can speak to that, last time they did the work requirements, it was an unmitigated disaster because Arkansas is one of the few states that's tried it. What we saw is a lot of people who were working or who were disabled, who were trying to comply, simply couldn't comply because the state system, the bureaucracy was so foreign. So they're just creating the rules for that now, and so there's going to be a big opportunity for us to have some say on those rules. But no matter what the rules are, we know a lot of people who are disabled or who are homeless or who have other challenges or who are just busy are going to miss, and frankly the budget estimates on how much money they're going to save by the work requirement depends on them throwing people who are actually qualified for Medicaid off the rolls for not complying. Arkansas is going to implement our work requirement a year earlier than the rest of the country. So we have an opportunity in Arkansas, all of us, to really show how horrid the impacts are as they start to be implemented. And also, sadly, we're going to be the guinea pigs in having to protect our communities from the harm that's going to happen.
So it's starting next year.
And the date is next year. Yeah, and they're not going to, on the federal level, they're not phasing in until after the midterm election. Such as smart politicians delayed it until after they run for re-election. But in Arkansas, state government moved it a year early. So they're just doing rulemaking now about all that.
Are those guidelines available anywhere? I have a family member with dementia who gets Medicaid. She can't work. She can't work. She doesn't even know where she is. So
If you signed in, we will get out some information about the rulemaking and where they are in the process so that y'all can engage with us. We're going to need a lot of advocates helping push them in the right direction.
Thank y'all so much.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. Always amazing.
I can go over my time. I told them 7 minutes.
You did great. We're going to be a little flexible in our time, but we can't go over too long. The library's going to kick us out. This is another thing. There's a hard stop. Our next speaker is Lynn Foster, who I know from the law school before she, I didn't know her as a naturalist until more recently, but she's the president of Audubon Society of Arkansas. She's going to talk about the clean energy and other environmental cuts to the program. Let's hear it from Lynn. Lynn has a slide deck.
I do. Let's see what works. Okay, so, you guys,
Get it down first,
Some of us only people how to do.
Yep. How many key advocates does it take on the computer? It's 2.
okay, great. Everybody. Wise from the State Club and I did a webinar on the federal budget a couple of weeks ago before it was signed, before the House actually voted for the bill. And it's taken from that, and it's probably too long. So I'm going to be just skipping through some parts of it. But in general, this is what I'm going to talk about. So the first thing that I'm going to do is to ask you all to do something as part of the solutions here. I'm going to ask you to contact your representative, who I assume is FranSha, and your two senators, John Bozeman and Tom Cotton, about a federal program area called the USGS Ecosystems Mission Area. And you might think, well, why would you want me to do that? Because the president signed the budget bill into law, right? So it's law. Well, not exactly. Between now and September or October, the House is going to be writing appropriations bills, which are the bills that actually fund the government. And these will be passed into law sometime during the fall. The fiscal year of the government starts October 1st. But if bills aren't all done, then they pass continuing resolutions until everything is funded. So according to National Audubon Society, and this was an email exchange I had with them, Congress still can make changes. They're not going to want to make big changes, but this is a small thing that I'm talking about. So the USGS Ecosystems Mission Area is an area where there are a number of projects that are extremely important to our country exist. One of them is the bird banding laboratory. It's more than 100 years old. Y'all know about bird banding, right? Well, this is the entity that regulates bird banding in the United States, and it is slated to be shut down. So no more bird banding, no more bird banding permits for banders, no more bird bans. You've heard of flyways, like the Central Flyway, the Mississippi Flyway. The only reason we know about those is because of bird bans. So bird bans are a terrific, incredible source of knowledge. No one else does this. It's going to be shut down. So I'm asking you to contact your officials and ask them to please fund the bird banding lab. Another one is the bird breeding survey. It is 60 years old. And it too is an invaluable source of data for the government, which the government then disseminates to people who need to know this information about our birds. Where are they thriving? Where are they disappearing? Okay, that's how we get this knowledge that we have. The Bee Lab is the third program, although there are many more programs under the mission system, or the Ecosystems Mission Area. There's programs about fires, flooding, avian flu, for another example. So these programs provide bedrock data and expertise that underpin wildlife conservation and ecological research. The Bee Lab, you ever tried to follow a bee somewhere? It's difficult to do research on bees, and you might be thinking of honeybees and hives. Those are not native bees, so those don't count. We have over 4,000 species of native bees, and the Bee Lab is the central point in this country for the research that's going on with respect to those. And of course, like everything else in the wild, native bees aren't doing well. So, NPR had an article about this. You might want to Google NPR and USGS Ecosystems Mission Area. It's a great article. They contacted the Federal Office of Management and Budget to confirm the proposed near elimination of the EMA, and this is what the Office of Management and Budget responded. The Ecosystems Mission Area is loaded with woke programming. This is obviously irrelevant to science and is exactly the kind of waste President Trump ran on, rooting out of the federal government. It also duplicates several other government programs that do ecosystem research. Wrong, wrong, and wrong. So,
Is there such a thing as a woke bee? Sorry.
what do we mean by woke these days? So, anyway, this is a QR code if you want to go directly to an Audubon email page that will give you a script that you can modify for an email to send to French Hill, Bozeman, Cotton. We'll give you their email addresses, they'll send you there. So, what else is happening in this budget? The EPA is kneecapped. Its budget is cut by 50%. Just this week, it was announced that their research division is closing down. So, will a pesticide be harmful to us? Well, we're not going to hear about it from the EPA because they're not going to be doing that kind of research anymore. So I'm not really sure who will, other than the companies that manufacture the pesticides. Lots of little programs that you've probably never heard of, and this is so true of the federal government as a whole, are just going to be shut down. Arkansas has benefited from a lot of these programs, but they're not going to be around for us. The head of the EPA has said, quote, "The mission of the EPA is to lower the cost of buying a home, heating a home, and running a business." Respectfully, I would disagree with that statement. The mission of the EPA is to protect our environment, but I guess not right now. It also will shut down environmental justice, the environmental justice program, which helps marginalized communities who are disproportionately affected by pollution. And I would argue that Arkansas is one of those marginal communities. It's going to be shortly. We're going to have lithium mining in this state on a big scale. And the federal budget now mandates forced coal mining, logging, and drilling. I forgot to put that on here because I was in such a hurry, Bill, because you were hassling me. Off of our federal public lands. So think of the Ozark National Forest, the Washington National Forest. These will now have more drilling, coal mining, and logging going on. The number you're supposed to go by last year's number and increase it by 25%. So 125% of what happened last year. And this is mandatory, it's not discretionary. Again, as part of this move to the past, clean energy, wind, solar, geothermal, none of those are being supported by our government anymore. They're being penalized, and instead what is being supported is extractive, non-sustainable, non-renewable energy sources. So the last thing that I want to talk about, and this is what George Wise asked me to talk about, so I put it last because he's not here, is Arkansas Act 373. This has the optimistic title of the Generating Arkansas Jobs Act. And it's kind of a multi-piece puzzle. There are at least 3 huge data centers planned for Arkansas. There's one in Little Rock that's going to go up at the port of Little Rock. And the company's secret. I don't know why that is, but apparently it's going to be gigantic. There's one, I think, already in progress in West Memphis, and there's one that may already be in progress in Conway. George mentioned 4. I'm not sure where the 4th one is. Anybody here know? Anyway, these data centers crunch data, they generate data, they consume huge amounts of electricity. Think of crypto mines, only way bigger scale. And they also use huge quantities of water to cool their equipment. So our bill was basically created for these kinds of data plants, but also this bill was written by a retired Entergy official. So a utility writing a bill for our legislature to kindly act for them. So this is going to enable utilities like Entergy to build new power plants much more easily. The permitting process is gonna be streamlined, and instead of waiting until the plant is really far along or built to get money from the ratepayers, they can start billing the ratepayers before the first act of construction. If they want to conduct a $2 million feasibility study for the new power plant that may or may not ever be built, they can bill the ratepayers for that. So our power bills are all going to go up. Is the cutting to the chase here? Power bills are going to go up. There's going to be a lot of big polluting data centers. Can you build them so that they don't pollute? Yes, you can. Will that happen in our state? Doubtful, very doubtful. Certainly not the law now. And then jobs also are disappearing. Clean energy is a source of jobs, as is environmental restoration and maintenance. Something that Republicans don't like to acknowledge, but nonetheless it is true. So we're going to be saying goodbye to the clean energy jobs, many of them which are in Arkansas. And there's a bunch of stuff here at the end about contacting your congressman and representatives. Are you going to get this up?
Yes, well, this is just be available online, and then all those contact information is also in this legislative directory which you can track.
And then if you want to contact me about anything, that's my email address. So if you have questions about any of this, or if you want to join the Arkansas Audubon Society, happy to talk. That's it. Questions?
Any questions for Lynn?
No questions. I love it.
Sorry to spoil.
That's all right.
As a law professor, do we have an opportunity or an alternative of bringing civil suits for damages or even proposed or suspected or feared damages?
Well,
as a result of
I'll
this?
give you the law school answer.
Good.
Because that depends. That's a great question.
Well, I was expecting on the other hand.
Again, no, it would just depend on what kind of damage you're talking about and the relevant law in that particular case. I will tell you that one of the truly terrible things in the federal budget bill did get taken out, and that was a section that would have made it almost impossible to sue to halt pollution and environmental destruction. Congress was going to make it virtually impossible for any lawsuit like that to happen, and that got taken out, thankfully. So this is a terrible bill, but it could have been even worse were it not for the Senate parliamentarian who eliminated a lot of these provisions that really didn't have anything to do with budgeting, but were policy provisions, and she took them out, and the Senate, thankfully, recognized what she did. I was afraid that they were going to just ignore it and steamroll over her rulings, and I guess they could have. That's not really have any law anymore these days, but they didn't, so that's a good thing.
Does the law prohibit or does it remove liabilities from actors?
I don't know. I haven't read anything to that effect. That's a good question.
Thank you very much.
Let's hear for Lynn again. So our theme is the negative, terrible impacts, particularly for Arkansas, of this bill. So we've heard about how the bill's going to potentially decimate our rural health system and harm working people for health care. Now we're learning it's attacking immigrant jobs. We're the natural state, the largest sector of our economy in Arkansas is tourism, and the other side is agriculture. Both are being threatened by cuts to the EPA. So thanks for bringing those issues to light. Next, we are going to talk about the expansion of immigration enforcement and the explosion in the size of ICE. And with that, we're going to hear from Badria.
Badria Mryyan.
There you
The attack has been furthered in the form of executive orders. We are seeing an expansion of executive power through the executive orders. We are seeing executive authority trickle through the Department of Homeland Security and the sub-agencies, ICE, CBP, USCIS, the Executive Office of Immigration Review. And so there's already been a lot of changes that what I would like to call the blueprint for this mass coordinated attack on immigrants and immigration. And so what this bill, this big, ugly, big bad wolf bill act does is it provides the funding. So if we're talking about the construction of the building, we are able to construct these horrible policies with this funding. And it is substantial funding. I put on my notes earlier, just insane, all bolded. For ICE, Customs and Border Protection. And so just for context, and I'm not a math person, but in 2000, Homeland Security was organized as an agency in 2003 in the wake of like 9/11. That's when we started to see funding allocated towards ICE and CBP and USCIS. And so in 2003, ICE's funding was $3.3 billion. In 2024, that rose to $9.6 billion. And now, Department of Homeland Security as a whole is going to have $45 billion just to focus on detaining immigrant adults. That funding is going to be available through September 30th, 2029. And so that is actually, within that, it quadruples ICE's budget. That's an approximately $11.25 billion each year. And so if you think about in 2024, that budget was $9.6 billion for ICE. Like, when I say insane, I don't know how to highlight that enough. For CBP, similarly in 2003 it was $5.9 billion, and in 2024, $19.6 billion. So it really is an insane increase. And so I think the question is like, what is that going towards? Well, it's going towards what you're already seeing. I think we've all seen the news. You've all seen the LA riots. You've all seen the attacks on major cities, but also attacks here in Arkansas. I don't know if you all know what the 2D7G program is, but basically it allows local law enforcement and municipalities, statewide, with smaller as well, to work in tandem with ICE. Police are not typically allowed to make arrests for immigration purposes, right? You have to be an ICE agent, Customs and Border Patrol agent, you have to have that. But through these agreements, they are allowed to work with ICE, they can make arrests for ICE, they can do investigations for ICE. And so there's an executive order from January of this year that's protecting the American people against the invasion of immigrants. This bill is, this bill act, proper name is beyond me, but it really gives the money. It is able to fund this and really build this out. And so what you're seeing on the news is really going to be amplified. We're going to see more ICE raids. We're going to see more ICE check-ins where immigrants who are undocumented, or maybe they have status that's pending, but it hasn't, equated to them having residency yet. They are having to go in for more check-ins. They will be arrested. There will be more facilities, detention centers built. There will be more private prisons, never a good thing. Lots of abuses in those. There will be $75 billion in enforcement and surveillance in border communities. That will be, beginning to be available in September of this year. And part of that is $75 billion for enforcement and surveillance. $47 billion of that will go towards the construction of the border wall. $7 billion for CBP agents, $5 billion for the enhancing CBP checkpoints, more border tech and surveillance, and then just any border enforcement purpose. There's like $10 billion for that. And you've seen the alligator Alcatraz in Florida. I think you're going to see more of that.
you're going to see more of that. I think you're going to see more non-traditional buildings being retrofitted to hold immigrants. You're going to see $3.3 billion go to the Department of Justice to prosecute immigrants. Historically speaking, the Executive Office of Immigration Review has been the least funded of all of these sub-agencies. So you're going to see more of that. You're going to see a hiring of more immigration judges to try to kind of get through the backlog. Backlog still exists. Hasn't gone anywhere. Some of my favorite judges have been fired unexpectedly. And so there are real life challenges where, okay, so you have all the money to hire all the people to be the judges, to be the ICE agents, but can you hire those people? I don't know. That's another kind of question. Something that really is greatly upsetting is there are protections in place for unaccompanied minors who enter into the U.S. Without a legal guardian, without parents. And so they are not going to get some of the same protections they've gotten in the past. And in fact, more funding is going towards violating their due process rights because of their young age. They should be treated a certain way, kind of like trauma-informed, and that's being attacked. They are going to build family units to detain detention centers to detain family units. That's unique. You don't usually detain children. That is not allowed through an agreement, in 1997, the Flores Agreement. And so now, under the guise of, oh, you're with your family, you can detain children. And for extended periods of time. That being said, there's so much to say. I'm so sorry, everyone. There's other things that happened. Once again, going back to these executive orders, where if you've just been charged with theft or burglary in the past, right? Maybe your case ended up being dismissed. That alone isn't, if you're undocumented, is enough to require mandatory detention of you as a person. So when you think about the want to detain and remove as many people as possible, you are getting the funding to do that. You are getting that golden ticket, so to speak. I also want to say there is this suffocation of immigrants who are trying to find immigration relief, particularly humanitarian immigration relief options. I work with a lot of asylum seekers. There is no fee historically to apply for asylum. Now there's going to be a $100 fee to apply for asylum and a $100 yearly fee, like a kind of renewal fee that you have to pay each year. Well, the backlog is pretty insane, and so we're talking like 5 years, 10 years, it depends. So you're taking people who have fled with nothing, and they come to the U.S. Maybe they have the clothes on their back, maybe they have a little bit of money, but they cannot pay this. But at the same time, we're making it harder for these people to get employment authorization documents because there's an increase on those fees as well. And so you want them to pay these fees for their asylum application, but they now don't have the money to pay for the employment authorization document, and they don't qualify for the fee waivers that we used in the past. A lot of my clients qualify for Medicaid through California, and so we use that to say, hey, they should qualify for a fee waiver, don't charge them for this employment authorization document, and now we can't do that anymore. And so they're not going to have that employment authorization document as easily to be able to get the job, to be able to pay the fee, to continue on with the process. Special immigration files who've been abused by family members and have entered the U.S. without a parent. They have fees. They're children. They're underage. They're going to have to pay $150 to file a kind of application. There's a border crossing penalty of $5,000 without an exception for asylum seekers who are not necessarily planning to enter the U.S. It's just, this is their right to flee their country if they feel like they're, can I keep going possibly?
For maybe a minute, but not for much longer.
Oh man, okay. I think my favorite thing here is the suffocation of immigrants, either by virtue of like detaining them and removing them and separating families and deporting them, but also if they are here and they're trying to make it and they apply for immigration relief, document, if you have to pay renewal fees, all of these things, if you don't get public benefits that have also been, you know, if they've been limited for Americans, they are being limited also for immigrants in a way they've never seen before. For asylum, people who've been granted asylum, to refugees, to women who have fled abuse and violence. So choking opportunity for the immigrants, I think that's where we're at, to where they feel so desperate that they leave and they don't stay. Yeah.
Let's hear from a lot of dense information there about really terrible things coming. Questions?
I have one comment, real quick question. I was really paying attention to the, even though I was raised in California, what really got me was when they went into the lettuce fields, because if you go to Central Valley, it's lettuce fields, and they were chasing, let's just go Mexicans, that's what we call them California up here from there. They're chasing Mexicans through the lettuce fields. That's when it really got to me. So what do you think will take, it's an image problem that will take to end this. And I think the thing they did in the world, when they did the Haitians and put them in there, and they call it cages, when that went around the world, looking on Facebook, that kind of, they took them out real fast. So what do you think will be the image thing that will bring this to a slowdown, almost to a slow grinding halt of the rage and all that?
Are you asking, like, what will be...
What event where some photographer and protester go around the world and make them stop? Or not stop, but slow it down. They're not going to get through all the bureaucracy like you did, but get that, that quick halt, that hard stop.
It's really hard. So, I mean, over the years, you know, throughout different administrations, Trump and Biden, Obama, there has been an increase in immigration enforcement. And, Obama had children in cages as well, so to speak, right? And so there were pictures and images of that. There were interviews done with these immigration agents, with these children, and there has been compelling images and stories shared. I mean, personally, whenever I see a mother or a grandmother who's been here for a long time being separated from their U.S. children, to me that should be enough, right? Like that should be enough to be compelling, and it isn't. And so I cannot speak for what legislators will find compelling, but I can speak to our own community. I can speak to advocating for. So a lot of immigration is rulemaking out of the executive office, and so there's usually like a comment period, notice of comment period for rules that are bad. So you can still do some good by reaching out to your legislators, but also by challenging some of these bad policies that are coming through the executive office and being kind of filtered through the executive office of immigration review and USCIS, because they have to give you an opportunity to speak about it and make comments about it, and they have to address those comments individually. They have to get through them before they put those policies in place, and so that's a good opportunity to kind of take action and attack and make your thoughts known about the inhumanity of something and maybe the inefficiency of some of these policies.
Let's go on to another question, so we get one or two more in before we're out of time.
That's fine. Everyone in this room, I feel, would be focused on the humanitarian aspects of this horror, right? And I think enough people in the country, whether they speak about it or not, recognize that. But given that we're such a capitalist society, and given that the administration is so focused on profit making, I'm wondering if there's a way to try to persuade the average Joe who may recognize the inhumanity but not be moved enough to act on it, to highlight how they're paying more money for these things to make profits for others. And that could piss them off. And I'm wondering if there's a way to highlight that, how we can all support. Here's the one of the real truths. It's about making money, not about saving the country. If there's a way to do that, it might turn some perspectives.
Yes, I think there is a potential there. You know, there are immigrants and everything, and immigrants, and they substantially contribute, right, to our communities. And so I think, you know, a tallying up of like, what does that look down to a dollar amount? That can be compelling. Like, what is the unit of work being applied? What is how much taxes are being paid out? Like those sort of like itemized breakdown. That will reach some people. I don't know how many people, but it's certainly a starting point to reach people who are otherwise not compelled by the humanitarian aspect.
Let's hear it. Thank you very much. One of the things that's kind of becoming clear is that even though we're doing a deeper dive than most, this is still scratching the surface. So one of the things that we do at the Arkansas Public Policy Panel is a Friday webinar series. And so I think you're going to see some webinars where we do deeper dives into parts of this. So if you signed up today, make sure you did. We'll send out notifications on when those are coming up. There's a lot to say, so sorry to keep it so short. But our next speaker we're really excited to have, talking about the impacts of the cuts to food aid, particularly for low-income kids, is Moore from the Arkansas Community Action Agencies Association. So let's hear it from Tomekia.
All right, yeah, so that's a really long day, and try saying that, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 times throughout your day, right? But thank you, Bill, so much for that introduction and for the opportunity to share on today. And thank you also for the opportunity to really highlight the conversation around some very critical conversations, critical situations here in our state. Thank you to each of you for showing up, right? That speaks to your heart, that speaks to the fact that you care. And to all of my fellow advocates in the room, thank you as well. Now, I'm here today not just as the Executive Director of Arkansas Community Action Agencies Association, but more importantly as a voice for children and their families, a voice for faces that go unseen, a voice for communities that go underserved, a voice for families that just don't have that presence, right? So what I want us to do is just to take a brief moment to talk about some rather jarring statistics across Arkansas. Looking at food insecurity rates as they impact our children and their families. Now, according to recent data from Feeding America, we're told that 1 in 5 children in Arkansas is food insecure. That is a jarring statistic within itself. But when we look across rural communities in Arkansas, those numbers become even more severe. Those numbers go all the way from 1 to 5 to 1 in 3 children facing food insecurity. What does it look like as a whole? More than 160,000 children in our state are unsure where their next meal is going to come from. My world comes from education. That's my background. I've taught in schools. We like to refer to a lot of behavioral models. One in particular that I'm going to note on today is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At the very base of Maslow's, it tells us that in order for anyone, a child, to reach their full potential, to reach the state of self-actualization, that child's physiological needs must first be met, right? So that's saying, if I'm hungry, guess what? I don't go on to reach my full potential. That one barrier stands in my way of moving on to the next level in life. That's unacceptable. Now here in our state, I will say that we've made strides through programs like Wake and Snap. However, we're talking about it today. Much of that progress has been erased. We have policy and legislation that now slashes funding and limits eligibility for crucial programs, effectively pulling the rug out from under families who are already struggling. People who are already having to decide, am I going to eat? Am I going to pay my light bill? Am I going to have gas so I can make it back and forth to work? These are the harsh conditions that children and their families face day to day here in our state of Arkansas. Policies that speak to these injustices, they're not rooted in care. It's a move impacting the most vulnerable communities among us with devastating consequences. When we gut programs that feed children, we're not just cutting dollars. It's a little bit deeper than that. We're cutting futures, right? Going back to Maslow's, they don't go on to reach their full potential. A hungry child can't learn, a hungry child doesn't grow, and a hungry child doesn't thrive. This is the world that we're living in. This is what is being created. And every meal that they miss is a missed opportunity to support brain development, to support health, to support stability. Now I'm going to speak just a little bit about community action, but we're all tied in together. I do believe that we live in ecosystems. What impacts one system impacts the next, so on and so forth. Now in community action, we believe in the power of people. We believe in the power of community. We believe that when given the resources and tools and that voice, that we will and we can rise to meet even the most complex challenges across our state. But we need policy that matches that energy. We need legislation that doesn't punish poverty, but instead uplifts those experiencing it. That's why these kinds of partnerships, these kinds of conversations are extremely critical. They matter. Your voice matters. And regardless of the fact, don't get tired. Keep trying, keep pushing, keep talking. While we're all trying to do our part here in Arkansas, we cannot out-organize bad policy. So what can we do? We keep coming together just like we are today. We tell real stories of children and their families. And we center real people, real conversations around the matters. Finally, we demand real solutions. So let me be clear. This conversation, it isn't just about handouts. And a lot of times in community action, that is a stigma attached to it. This is much larger of a conversation than just giving somebody food or, putting food on somebody's table at the end of the day. This is about a hand up. Remember I said we live in ecosystems. What impacts the next impacts the other. And I'm going to steal Rebecca's thunder and quote her. There's something that she said that's very powerful, and it still resonates and speaks very clearly to me today. When everyday Arkansans win, we all win, right? So this is about a hand up and not a hand out. It's about recognizing that no child in Arkansas or anywhere in this country should go to bed hungry in a nation as rich as ours. So let me close this with an old proverb that talks to when you pray, move your feet. Okay? We've been praying long enough for change. It's time we move our feet. It's time we act boldly, stand firmly, and speak loudly. For our children, for our families, and for their futures. A future in which no one is left behind. Again, I thank Arkansas Public Policy Panel for this space and for this opportunity to share. I thank you. Keep shining a light on these issues. Your voice does matter. Thank you.
Questions about the cuts with
Hi, I know Sanders has been really pushing for, free breakfast in schools, and we're really working on food security, right? But seeing where the gaps where this will how much strain is gonna be put on these, and like where are the places in which, as a community, we would be able, I saw the Arkansas School District also instituted free breakfast, lunches, encouraging more districts to do that, but where else are we gonna be seeing the most amount of need, and where would we be able to meet that?
Absolutely, and that's a good question. There are a ton of gaps right now in looking at food insecurity when it comes to our children, and looking at what's even to come down the road. While we do appreciate the universal breakfast that was recently passed into legislation, just looking at how do we come together to solve some of these issues across our state. I think one of the biggest things that we can do is in that space, coming together, right, leaving no voice out, bringing everybody to the table. Churches, for instance, we've missed out on so much potential when it comes to truly engaging our churches in these conversations. We use churches for things like space, we use churches for, volunteers and things like that. But how often are we really tapping into that potential of our churches to solve problems, to help us solve problems across our communities? So bringing all of these different pockets of the population together, I think that's going to prove to be tremendous in coming towards a solution.
You first.
Thank you, Ms. Moore, for your presentation. It was very valuable. A caveat to what you said is also, as it relates to the free lunches, children were being bullied, those of minority groups. So this way, across the board, doesn't matter how much your mother or father makes. So we have to look at it holistically as it relates to that. But she's actually right. We got to see where those pockets are. And I really appreciate everything that you said, because children of homeless families, as well as those with disabilities, take it up 3 or 4 notches. So,
Absolutely. And again, it kind of goes back to something that we talked about earlier. Stop punishing poverty, right? The bullying that you're speaking about. At the end of the day, that collective impact that we're emphasizing, that we're elevating in conversation today, I truly do believe that's going to be the key when it comes to solving a lot of issues that we're seeing across our state.
One more question on the nutrition.
One more common question. And where are these starving kids? We're thinking that a starving, hungry kid is crying, like they always say, donate $19 a month. I understand food security if there's no grocery store. But where are these starving kids, hungry kids with growling stomachs? I'm not saying it doesn't exist. Just where are they? Because there's the free lunch, the food shelves, they go to the food pantry. So where are these hungry kids?
That's a good question. Let me share something. Just to kind of break down, some stigmas maybe around this conversation. And I'm going to take this to poverty because a lot of what we're talking about is connected back to that, right? We have people living amongst us, right beside us, in our churches, in different groups that we affiliate with, living like this. We just don't know it. Right. One population in particular, the Alice population, asset limited income constrained employees. These people go to work every day, right? But they don't make enough to meet all of their needs. And the very definition of poverty, a lot of times we connect it back to finances. But it truly does reflect a lacking of something, right? So right now we're talking about food poverty. These people living in the Alice community, they have to make those critical decisions. How do I feed my family, right? And still pay the light bill, and still have gas to get back and forth to work, and still be able to meet all of the other needs that we have. Something's going to go missing, right? Because I don't have enough to make it happen. So to answer your question, they are all around us. We may not know it, right? Because people are showing up at work. Maybe she's the receptionist sitting at the desk every morning, smiling bright and shiny. But she goes back home to a very harsh reality, right? So these are people all around us.
I'm
sorry, one more question.
It's short.
I'm concerned about the food banks.
Yeah.
I'm concerned about the funding of food banks. I work at a very small, or volunteer at a very small food pantry. And we get a lot of our stuff with food banks. We also get a lot of stuff with Kroger, you know, whatever. But how is the food bank funding? Do you have a sense of our funding and if it's going to be cut or?
So food banks are trying to be a little bit more innovative in their approach right now. We've had some conversations with the Arkansas Food Bank, as well as the Arkansas Hunger Relief Alliance. I don't know if we have any representatives in the audience today that can speak a little bit more in an educated manner to that. But I do know from conversations with the Arkansas Food Bank, they are trying to be a little bit more innovative in their approach. They primarily work with churches, food pantries, that sort of thing. Seeing that since COVID, churches really haven't bounced back in terms of manpower and volunteers and that sort of thing. So there's become a bit of a challenge to get food out across communities based solely on what the churches are able to do. So when looking at taking things into the school systems and into other pockets of the community, they really are trying to expand that reach.
Yeah, and two things to follow on that. So one is that, again, look for us to have a series of webinars diving deeper into some of the aspects of including nutrition. It's so important. Arkansas is #1 in the country for child poverty. It's a massive issue here. The other goes back to the point that you raised. What we're seeing nationally is an attack from the administration on our institutions. And so whether that be the agencies that are being slashed to the bone, that our communities rely on, whether that be higher education, whether it be philanthropy. So what we're seeing is that while the community needs are rising and they need more institutional support to meet their needs around nutrition or healthcare or whatever, those institutions are being slashed, including philanthropy, which is impacting the nonprofit sector. So like a friend of mine at the Rockefeller Brothers Foundation in New York, told me, and she's an expert in this, but she told an audience that she's speaking to, she's expecting a 20% reduction in the number of nonprofits in the United States in the next year. Because giving is, at the foundation level, is shrinking as well because of fear of the Trump administration and all the market uncertainty. So once again, it's falling on us in the community. We've got to step up and fill those gaps and support we're feeling at the panel too in terms of our fundraising. It's really affecting everybody. So it's a big giant issue right now. So then, in the crank the gear transition, so why are all these cuts happening? Some of it's ideological, but most of it's financial. All these cuts are happening to give billionaires a massive tax break. So to talk about the tax equity impacts and the budget impacts and how all this is going to trickle down into the Arkansas state budget, it's going to affect our communities, please help me welcome Gess.
All right, thanks Bill, and thanks to all of you for coming out. It's nice to be in solidarity with all of you and think about every single state in this country is having a mess like this today. And remember, I'm trained as a political scientist, remember that it only takes 3.5% of the population to create a sustained movement. So that's what we're all about, right? And the food bank question, I just conferred with a colleague, we recently heard this stat. Food banks are great, and they're going to be innovative, and they're going to have to step up. But for every meal a food bank provides, SNAP provides 9 meals. Whoa. So cuts to SNAP are tremendous and will hurt every single state in the country, but especially Arkansas with the highest food insecurity rate, right? Okay, so I get to, don't let your eyes glaze over as I get to talk about budget and economics, right? This stuff is really important because this is where rubber hits the road, right? And this question is very astute. Maybe we can move lawmakers showing how much economic harm is being caused. The moral arguments are great, they're important, we gotta keep making them, but also the economic arguments, right? I'm not gonna go into a lot of depth on the details of the policy changes, but really sort of a 30,000 foot sort of economic picture. So we had this question about rural hospitals, super important question. You may have seen this, it was covered in the Dem Gazette. A recent study said 30 out of 47 rural hospitals in Arkansas are already in financial danger. This is before this bill, right? And so we know they're going to be seriously challenged. Yes, even those that don't end up shutting down will be cutting services. You might have to drive farther for certain services. And that means laying off employees, right? And many of these rural communities, the hospital is the largest employer, or maybe it's second to the school district, or the state, the county government may be in there too. But it's one of the biggest employers. So it has this downstream effect that is tremendous, right? This is a slight example of how advocacy works. Senators heard so much from people about rural communities being really hurt that they put in this rural, let's see what it's officially called, the Rural Health Transfer Program, which identified $50 billion to be used to help prop up rural hospitals because they realized how much harm they were causing with the Medicaid cuts, right? But lest we should, I'm not suggesting we congratulate them too much because that $50 billion is about 5% of the $1 trillion cuts in Medicaid, right? And that $50 billion only lasts 5 years. These Medicaid cuts are forever, right? So a huge problem for our rural communities. I do want to add though, how many people in here are somehow associated with UAMS? How many people have ever been to UAMS for a service? Okay, we know this for a fact. When Arkansas expanded Medicaid, UAMS saw its uncompensated care rate, you know, taking care of people not being paid for it, drop from 14% to 4%. So we know giving people health insurance actually works, right? Wow. And we know if we reverse that, if we take that away, you know, it's not just our rural hospitals, UAMS and other urban hospitals are also going to see challenges here. Beyond Medicaid, though, we are also eliminating the enhanced premium tax credits. I call this the rocket fuel of health insurance. So people don't qualify for Medicaid, they can't afford premiums on their health insurance. The government stepped in based on their income and said, we'll give you tax credits to help you take care of that. And in Arkansas, 130,000 people participate in the marketplace for their health insurance. They get an average tax credit of $477 a month. Those are all going away. So here's a great example for you. A 60-year-old couple that makes $82,000 a year, which is, you know, fairly typical for Arkansas, right? They'll see their annual premiums go from $7,000 a year to $23,000 a year. Whoa. You make $82,000, your health premiums are $23,000. So not only are people going to lose health insurance because they're kicked off Medicaid, people aren't going to be able to afford buying health insurance from the marketplace. So these obviously, again, when the rubber meets the road, right? We've heard a lot about SNAP. You know, 400,000 Arkansans receive SNAP at some point, right? Vast, I should say majority, but I look at that 170 number of children, 170,000 number of children. It's a lot of children, right, that participate in SNAP. Well, all the cuts to SNAP, right? For the first time in the history of SNAP, there's a cost share to states, and it's based on the error rate if you gave SNAP benefits incorrectly. So for Arkansas, that means an additional $55 million Arkansas is going to have to spend as their cost share. We're really close to the next tier on error rates, so it could be more, it could be 110. And also, we have to cover more of the administrative costs, another $23 million in administrative costs. So if you want to add that up, the state share, the administrative costs, that's over a third of our projected budget surplus in the state of Arkansas for next year. Okay, so we have $214 million in surplus. We're going to eat it up with SNAP stuff. Hopefully the state can say no and we can just get rid of SNAP, right? which would obviously be horrible. But that's before we spend surplus on expanded private school vouchers through the Act and lots of other stuff that's eating up our surplus, right? We just don't have money for this. Is the point here. Some aspects that aren't talked about very much in this, because maybe it's not a big price tag, but it is a big philosophical kind of change in the way we think about things. Anybody know there's a $5 billion tax shelter for federal vouchers for private school? So here's the way this works. Any person out there can give, luckily they limited it. They weren't going to limit the amount. They limited it to $1,700. I can give $1,700 to this organization that bundles money and then gives out scholarships to people to go to private school. For every dollar I get $1 in tax credit. It's 100% tax shelter. This is unheard of. I cannot think of or find another example where you get 100% of your giving back. There's some comparisons here. Disaster relief, 35% back. Giving it to your church, 35% back. Giving it to veterans groups, 35% back. Giving it to a children's hospital, 35% back. Give it to this federal private voucher thing, you get 100% back. And by the way, this is available everywhere in the country, including states who recently rejected efforts to have private school vouchers, like Kentucky, like Tennessee, other southern states. Yeah. Some of you have children in college. Some of you might be college students. You might are planning to send kids to college. Just got a lot more expensive to borrow money for college. So, by the way, 400,000 people have federal loans in Arkansas for a total of $15 billion. So it's a program that has supported Arkansas students. Hurts in two ways, this bill. It makes it more expensive to borrow money because what it does is limit the amount you can borrow from the federal government, forcing families who don't have very much money into the private market to borrow money, which is more expensive than these guaranteed low rate federal loans. It limits the overall amount. It also makes it more expensive to pay off your loans, and there are no things like hardship exemptions, unemployment exemptions. So it hurts borrowers. There's another part I'll mention. I have some colleagues here who know how much I value the liberal arts. There's also a thing in this bill that says, hey, university, if you're giving money to, if you're taking federal money and giving it as loans to your students, and they're getting degrees where they're not making enough money, then you can lose your effort to have any federal financial aid. So we don't know the details of this, but apparently there's going to be some group that decides how much money a degree should lead to, and if you don't make enough, then a university could lose federal aid. So what happens to early childhood education, right? Unfortunately, I know this is wrong, we can talk about this for days too, early childhood educators don't make enough money, right? But that's such an important, we heard about Maslow, we heard about child development, that's such an important time in a child's life, right? So we want our folks who are with our children to be educated. So are these universities going to get rid of these programs where, quote unquote, degrees don't make enough money? What happens to English degrees and philosophy degrees and religious studies degrees? And I can name the humanities, right? I don't want to pick on the humanities, but I mean,
my wife's an professor.
Very good. Lynn did a great job talking about the energy stuff. Really hurts on the supply side and the demand side. So we're going to lose tax credits for green energy development. There's tax credits lost for consumers. The estimate right now is Arkansas will lose 4,500 green energy jobs. Not insignificant. And we can expect our rates, all of us, our rates to go up by 10%, our energy rates. That's before, you also talked about the state level effort, right, to build new power plants and charge it. And there was an article in the paper, they're already asking for big rate hikes to build new plants, right? This is before all that. So if you're already struggling to put food on the table and pay your medical bills, and suddenly now you're like, well, we can't run the air conditioner, right? in Arkansas when it's 100 degrees outside. I mean, these are real decisions people have to make, right? Way too long. They did expand the federal child tax credit. That's great. Unfortunately, not as much as it was going to be. It's $2,000 per child now. It was going to be $2,500. They went to $2,200. That is good. But it did nothing to correct this hole that leaves low-income people out of participating. Believe it or not, federal law prevents our lowest earners from participating in the child tax credit, at least fully. And so 250,000 children in Arkansas, 250,000 are left out of the full child tax credit. And it hurts the lowest income families the hardest. It should be reversed, right? It should be the other way around. I won't say a lot about this. I can go on why, tax on tips has all kinds of challenges, as good as it sounds. But here's the good take-home message. Big selling point, campaign promise, okay, we deliver no tax on tips and overtime. That provision expires December 31st, 2028. Meanwhile, the tax stuff is permanent, right? The tax benefits to mostly the wealthier are permanent. And this just shows you how regressive the extension of the tax cuts are, right? So this is actually for Arkansas. The effect in Arkansas. Bottom 20% of people in Arkansas, these are quintiles, they make less than $25,000. What is their tax savings because of the One Big Beautiful Bill? $60 a year. Okay, the top 1% makes $700,000 or more in Arkansas. What's their average tax saving year? $50,000. Right, incredibly regressive. And by the way, these aren't really savings. None of us in here are going to see our tax bills go down. This is an extension of the tax cuts that were put in place in 2017. So it's pretty disingenuous for our congressional delegation to say, we had to vote for this, otherwise your tax bills would have gone up, because they got us in this mess, right? What number of years ago that was. I just want to show you something really quickly. I know we're too long. We put together a series of maps at Arkansas Averages. This one is one of my favorites. The left map is the percent covered by Medicaid. So if I do this, slide this over, right? Darker, the more percent in that community covered by Medicaid. So if I click here, Phillips County, 42%. That's the most in any county. So 2 out of 5 people, right, are covered by Medicaid. Go to Bentonville, 14%. Not surprising to anybody here, right, if you know Arkansas. So if I slide the map the other way, median, sorry, I'm in trouble with this mouse. Median, you see the colors kind of switched? Dark color. So Bentonville, the median household tax savings because of this bill, $2,000. That's the median right in the middle, right? But look here, 27, a third of the people will make $7,000 or more. Right? Let's go back to Phillips. 943 is the median, and only 6% make that upper tier, but 40%, 2 out of 5 people will only see the households will only see $60. This is a pretty powerful map that states the obvious. This makes the wealthy wealthier and the poor poorer. Right? Okay. Let's see. You have a link on that one handout. There's a bunch of other maps there. You can see how this affects your county directly. And just to wrap up, the purpose of this was essentially to lower the debt, but we're not. $3.4 trillion. This is according to the CBO, which is nonpartisan, right? The Congressional Budget Office. And none of this is happening in a vacuum. I've just been talking about the One Big Beautiful Bill, right? We have tariffs going on. We have rescission acts. They just clawed back money from USAID and NPR and PBS. This won't be the last rescission stuff we see. Appropriations, a bunch of people talked about. They finally announced yesterday that they'll actually give us the educational money they had already promised to us, right? Firing federal employees, there's 20,000 federal employees in Arkansas. Anyway, you get the idea. I'll skip all that. We're going to talk about it later. Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
We're running close on time, but any questions for Pete on the tax and budget?
Is there anywhere a map of comparison on, I love the map you showed us, to include voter turnout?
Yeah.
We can create a map on voters. So Arkansas has the lowest voter turnout in the country. And another fun fact for you, someone who signs a ballot measure petition is 7 times more likely to actually vote. So we've been using ballot measures to encourage civic participation. But that would take a little work, but we can figure it out.
I'm sure it's highly correlated with poverty, right? So you would see Warren County has lower turnout rate because we make it really hard in this country and more so in the state to vote. So, yeah, we can look at that.
I'd be curious personally to see the trend of which side do they vote for? I don't know how to put that without being way partisan. Are they shooting themselves in their own ear?
You have a question in the back?
Yeah, could you walk us through that tax reference that you were saying about national debt? Because it seems really important to understand this national debt in the context of what the bill is saying. So could you walk through the difference between how the 2017 debt and how the current bill are interacting again?
Yeah, I mean, quite simply, we know that, so when they voted in 2017 on the tax cut, the promise was increased economic activity would make up for it, right? And that just didn't happen, so we went further into debt. So when they looked this time, they said, okay, if we want to extend those, we're going to add $4 trillion to the debt. So how can we not add that to the debt? We can do that by cutting Medicaid, right? Because $1 trillion is Medicaid, 200 billion is SNAP, right? Those are the big price tags. So it's a way of saying, I mean, it's disingenuous to say this bill actually reduces the debt because we knocked 1.2 trillion out of it, but really it's because you're adding all that debt because of tax cuts.
Any other last questions? Okay, great. So let's talk for just a second. We're running long on time, so we're going to keep this short. About what we can do about all this. So again, the timeline is, this phase is in over time. And so there's time now for us to start advocating or continue advocating with our congressional delegation to make sure they know how bad these bills are. Particularly on the Medicaid, their staffs know. We've met with the staffs of our congressional delegation, and they know how bad this is for Arkansas, and they voted for it anyway because they're looking at the national politics instead of the impact on our communities. So understanding the timeline, Pete, you want to talk about the timeline for just a second?
Yeah, I mean, you have this again on that handout, so I don't know how much detail we can go into, but yes, there's all this talk about the Medicaid stuff in 2 years. Not exactly true. Stuff starts happening immediately. So in the next few months, SNAP limits and work requirements, changes on SNAP. The effect on legal immigrants starts pretty much immediately. And let's be really clear about this. We're not talking about undocumented folks. We're talking about legal immigrants. The law changes the benefits to legal immigrants, right? The state's got to get going right away because by October 1 they have to apply for this $50 billion, some of this $50 billion in rural hospital support. But really, open enrollment this fall, people are going to try to get health insurance on the marketplace, and they're not going to have those tax credits anymore. So that's immediate, right? And then, it continues on. Let's see just what to put out. By January 21st, the community engagement, the work reporting rules, January 1st, 2027 go in place. But as we already mentioned, the state is shooting for January 1st of 2026 on the work requirements. our waiver may be in conflict with this law, so I don't know what's going to happen. I just talked to a colleague that we need to force public hearings on this so we can get public input into this process, but that's something to look out for. Yes, cost sharing for SNAP starts in 2027. Yeah, so you see it all here. It's phased in, but we'll feel the effects immediately. I think we need to switch to accountability, and you're going to talk about some of this, I guess, but really hold our legislators responsible for this bill that hurts their constituents.
Do you make this available online for us?
We will. We'll email you. Brady has put all the handouts and attachments into a folder. We'll email you all a link to that. Okay, so I'm going to, one last question.
Okay. I'm someone who writes a letter to the editor every 30 days.
God bless you.
So what I'm telling people I'm in purgatory between those 30 days. But there are a lot of engaged people in this room, and we've gotten a whole lot of good information today. And I urge you all to send Brenda Looper. She's always asking for more. And there's lots of good information that we've gotten even before we get into the weeds.
Then thank you for that. So there's a couple other, kind of close this. I'll just leave it open.
I can do it out later.
Thank you. Okay. All right. So a couple other just quick wrap-up things. So again, a lot of you all have been out in the streets doing the protests. I think as we do those protests, making sure that we're tying it to substance as opposed to politics is really important. So all of you are leaders in your community, so help us educate folks about what you've learned today. We're going to, again, follow up with webinars when we email you out information to those. Please feel free to share those to your network so we can get more people involved in the conversation. The biggest advocacy tool that we have are going to be the people who are impacted by these terrible outcomes that we're talking about and their personal stories about how it impacted their health, their access to food, their green energy jobs, or their, we have farmers in Arkansas that depend on bees. So cutting bee research is insane, particularly for an ag state like Arkansas. So finding those folks who are directly impacted and helping promote their voices, and we're happy to help you all do that. If you have folks, please connect with us that way. That is our stories of just how we're all affected by this stuff are our biggest, most powerful tool, absolutely, that we have. A couple other just brief things. The Citizens First Congress, which is a coalition of 50 organizations, we make things like this and we lobby together for the legislature. We are meeting on August 2nd at 11 a.m. at the state capitol. You all are welcome to come. It's a coalition of member organizations, so to be a member of the CFC, you have to be one of the member organizations. But the quarterly meetings are open, so if you want to come and check it out, I'm sure we're going to have more conversation going deeper again into the weeds of some of the bills that we're talking about. I realize we gave you guys more depth than what most folks are getting, but still not nearly as much depth as there could be in any of these topics. The Citizens First Congress website, again, has these resources, so it has a legislative vote guide, so you can download it there, share that with your members, make sure as candidates start asking us for our votes, make sure you're organizing candidate forums and ask them, why did you vote for SB 307, which I don't know what that is, but anyway, this will tell you exactly what that is. That was the bill that allowed them to basically deregulated energy in Arkansas and lets them build new energy plants. That's the one that you were talking about. So again, us asking legislators and candidates, why did you vote for this, or are you planning, what's your position on that? So it really helps you to get into the weeds and the details. I want to thank Scott Holliday. His idea was this town hall forum instead of sitting out in the heat with signs. Sitting out in the heat with signs and yelling at buildings is super important work as a part of this too, but we sometimes need to step back and get into the conversation. So thanks for the suggestion, and we took it. Lastly, I want to just thank all of you for being here. I want to thank all of our speakers. They've all been amazing. If you felt frustrated by the time constraints, we're going to invite you to come to a webinar, and we're going to get into it even more. There are cookies on that table. Please take them so I don't. And I